Liva, thank you so much for taking out your time to be with me today. I've known you for a long time, and I feel like looking at your picture in the screen rather than look into the camera phone. Okay, so that's one of the unnatural things about a Zoom meeting, but you're in UK and I'm in India, so this is how we'll do it. Um, I wanted to thank you for doing this, for sharing your story, and I know a lot of our patients and people who live with type 1 diabetes are going to benefit from hearing this. And we're doing it as a 4-part interview to maybe walk alongside you, recapping how things have been since the time you got diagnosed with type 1. What's that been like as a journey growing up, going through your childhood, the diagnosis, the learning curve, dealing with the healthcare system, learning about your body, learning what society understands about type 1 diabetes, your own personal challenges, the change in mindset, and really where you've reached today and the kind of life you're living now and what you're looking forward to for the future. And I'm really thankful that you've been so caring and kind to open up and literally make yourself an open book for this. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think I mean, if I've reached this phase, it's also because there have been many people who have guided me back on path. Because it could be very easy to get to the victim's role, and that's something that I've played for a long time. So to reach this phase, it's been a journey, and I think it's been 10 years actually since I've met you. It's 2013, so 2023, so 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been that journey, and there have been people along who've been constantly guiding to ensure that I'm on track. And when I was off track, I think that's when the universe just threw me right there through challenges and ensured that I learned. So I think I've reached that phase today where I've realized it's time to tell the story, reach out to people who need to hear it. And it could just be that one person who even benefits from it, but
Yeah.
it's going to change the person's life. I think it's important to get it out there. So thank you for giving me the platform to share my journey. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. The gratitude is mutual, and I think at some point, for those of you who are watching this recording, either Liva or I might choke up a little bit because, because it's been very real for both of us. Let me rewind. This I think we met in somewhere in 2013. That's what you just mentioned,
December. Yeah.
December. And I had just been back in India. That was my second year back in India after coming back from the US, and we'll tell that story another day how we met. But I think it's been a journey for me also in the last 10 years. So I'm so glad that we got to do this together. But enough small talk, because I know everybody wants to hear about what this whole thing is. What are these ladies going to talk about? So let's get down to it. You were 9 years old, and you remember the date, obviously, December 19th, 1996. Do you remember what that day was like, and maybe what your symptoms were before this diagnosis hit you and your family, like a big surprise?
So while it is a little blurry, and of course, at that time I was a child, so my mom remembers this more than me. But in my blurry image, I remember not feeling too much of myself. And this was a time when I had traveled to Delhi, and I was not really eating much food. I was just going along with my family along to places, but I was not feeling too well. And of course, I didn't know what that was. And I started losing weight progressively, because I think that was the only time someone called me plump. It was back then in 1996. So I was actually becoming the typical plump child that people call healthy now. But I was one of those. And then people started telling my mother, your daughter's losing weight, or why is she losing weight? And it was over the period of 2.5 months where I was slowly losing weight. And then of course there was a time then it was December. So November, December is October when we went to Delhi. November, December was the time when there were some school picnics. There were some school occasions that were there. So mom thought that I ate from out. She's not interested in eating food. And there was also this period of Advent in December, which is before Christmas. And my parents are very religious, so they abstain from non-vegetarian food during their duration. They thought that I am not having food because she wants her chicken, she wants her fish, and we are having vegetarian food, so I'm being fussy. And mom noticed the loss of appetite. She's just not eating food. And then there was a school picnic where I told them I had an ice cream. So they thought maybe it's something caused by that. And it was after the school picnic, leading up to the day I went to the hospital, that I started vomiting. So I started vomiting for 2 days continuously. So again, they thought it's a food because of eating out, and they didn't realize it could, of course, nobody would have thought of it. And my mother's a doctor, as you know, but it didn't strike her at that point. She just thought who would think of something as diabetes in 1996? And then we went to the hospital because I kept vomiting, and I started getting slight fever. So they were a little worried about what this could mean. And we went to the BPT hospital, which was nearby. My dad has worked in BPT, so it was easier to just go there. And they saw the symptoms, the person was not eating. And because I was vomiting, the usual process is to give glucose. And they gave, because I was a kid, luckily they didn't give too much glucose, but they did give glucose. So the levels started shooting up, and my condition kept deteriorating instead of getting better. And that shouldn't be the case. And everyone is still wondering, why is she not eating? If there are fluids in the body, there should be something that makes her eat. And I was still not eating anything. And I was there for about 4 or 5 days in the hospital with the condition getting worse. And all I kept asking is, I want liquid food. I just want liquids in the body, which now, of course, means thirsty.
Dehydration.
Yes. So I was, and that time it didn't strike. And I'm just, for some reason, it is getting worse. And my mother can't understand what was the cause. They did the regular blood test. No one checked for blood sugar, but they checked what are the other causes possibly. And then something, and this is where I believe in the universe and the higher power. Something told my mother, do a urine test. Just check for urine, because she started getting this smell of ketones, I think, getting into the decay state. So that's when she just said, just do a urine test. And they did the urine test. That's when they saw the ketones. That's when they saw of course, the sugar there. And then they realized, and the hospital was not equipped to deal with diabetes at that stage. I was moved to Wadia Hospital, and I was semi-conscious because, of course, the sugar had shot up quite a bit. And at that stage, I was never out of it completely, but I do remember I remember school friends coming and meeting me, some of them looking at me and laughing, because I was, of course, in that state of being drowsy. But these are small images that struck in my head as a child. Like, why are my own friends laughing at me, or people coming and visiting me, and they're just needles everywhere? I'm like, when am I getting better? And I had to go for a wedding, and I was like, when am I going for the wedding? And then we moved to a Jeep. It's funny how I remember all this, but I remember in the Jeep, I was lying down. I fell down in the Jeep because I was that drowsy and I couldn't sit. I'm trying to get up, and my mother and father deal with stress in completely different manners. Mom just keeps it in and tries to find a solution, or as a doctor, she will think of, what do you do? Thank God for that. Dad, on the other side, is someone who is not really well versed with dealing with stress, I would say. And so he would tend to, of course, get upset and angry. So I could hear him screaming at someone it may sound as an easy task to climb back to the seat. I just couldn't get up.
Oh my God.
I was trying to crawl over. I'm wondering what is happening. And then we went to the hospital, and I remember my father, and for this, sometimes I'm grateful to him, in a way, raising his voice and saying, my daughter is in a very serious condition. You guys cannot be sitting this long to just admit her. Because he realized this is something really grave. And I think they must have got a little upset, but they did quickly move to the feet. And then I was rushed to the ICU. I was there for about a week in the ICU. I don't remember the entire duration of it, but I do remember a lot of injections, and nobody was allowed in the ICU. But I know they gave insulin. And I think in my head, and my mom doesn't know this because she was not allowed in the ICU, roaming around in the ICU, the minute you got the insulin and water, I could actually start getting, I started moving up after a while. I started eating food. The appetite was back. I started fighting for food. They gave half an egg. I said, I want a full egg. They gave green grams. I'm like, I want tasty food. I don't want the hospital food. So it was something that the appetite came back. And it was around the time for Christmas. So as a child, I made it in my head that that's my second birthday, that I was given a chance to live again. And it's an auspicious occasion. So yeah, for many years, I celebrated December 25th as my second birthday. And I was like, I got a chance to live. So it
Wow.
was, yeah. So that was approximately the ICU journey.
Wow. And then you were discharged on insulin.
Yes, I was. So I was there for about a month in the hospital, in the Vadia Children's Hospital. And again, I remember some doctors, Dr. Nisha, she was very caring. She would come and check on me all the time. And there was another doctor, my mom said, who would come and keep looking into what I'm doing or helping out. And one thing that they told my mother is whether the sun rises or not, she will always be on insulin. So I remember my mom saying that she didn't physically cry because my relatives came there and they started crying. Her sister was crying because she's like, "What's happening to my niece?" My mom was staying strong, but she kept saying internally when someone said that diabetes, as a doctor, she knew what that meant.
Yep.
And what that would mean for lifelong. So yeah, so they helped educate what a person should do at that time. It was about exercise. You need to take insulin. Be careful about food. And they did motivate them that it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine as long as she takes her insulin. She has to take her insulin and manage her levels. So I think then there was a journey of learning and going with the flow, which I didn't. I believe my mother and father would have, but I didn't at that time.
You were 9 years old. I mean, you were in fourth standard. You were very, very small. And that's one of the things about this form of diabetes is people don't understand how did a child get it? They're wondering, did she eat something? Did she do something to get it? And that's the thing with type 1 diabetes is that the child or the family has not done anything wrong to get this. It's not your fault. It's very different. We don't like to blame anybody for any disease, but type 2 diabetes is something that definitely gets triggered by lifestyle choices. Type 1 kind of really comes out of the blue. We really don't know why it happens. You didn't have anybody in your family that had type 1. So this really came as a total surprise and shock. And you were then leaving hospital with this understanding that I was very ill and I need insulin to stay well.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't know the consequences of this or how this is going to change my life. I was too young.
Yeah.
And which is also the beauty of innocence, right? You don't overthink. Your mind doesn't create those problems that don't exist. You don't interact with too many negative people. I can vouch for those years that I was still very optimistic. I was positive. It was injections. It was fine. I still say I was a happy child. I came first in class after that. I remember that. And I went there and I'm like, I need to study. I was always a good student, coming from a family of doctors and engineers and and it's a South Indian family. So they have way high expectations. And I remember coming first in class. My teacher was very supportive, bless her. Miss Matthias, she actually took special care, ensured during a test I could eat a fruit because, and I have to bring this up, at the time they had mentioned have 6 meals, breakfast, a 11 o'clock snack, which was a fruit. Of course, carb count was not taught. Lunch, then a snack, dinner, milk before sleeping. And it right now I'm just so shocked that I followed that.
Yeah.
But you had to do that because they have all of them had dietitians. Every doctor I met had dietitians who would meet me and draw a chart. This is what you have to follow, timings. And I did. So in exams, I would get that break to just have a fruit.
Mm.
I didn't do a blood test. My sugar may have just been 160 or so. I would just eat
Because
out
you
of,
were supposed to.
yeah,
That's
I
what
was
you were
told.
told.
No one actually questioned, no one asked anything. But from a positive side, that's made me a very punctual, dedicated person throughout. I am on time and I will follow deadlines because it's been in my head since a child. So the
Ah,
positives,
the
it just
positive.
helps you from how your outlook towards life. Come what may, I will not wake up late. I don't care when I sleep. I have to eat at a time. It's in my head
Mm.
from childhood. So I've
Mm.
never woken up at 10 a.m. I don't know what that means, 9 a.m. I was never a thing. So anyway, it was part of that, but they did help with basic diabetes education, what they knew at the time, and they helped
Mhm.
with some of the on some of the things that is essential for moving ahead. And they all said you can live a normal life. And in fact, my A1C was in the first 2 years or 2.5. It was 5.5, 5.7. And I remember my mom was so happy that, I mean, I know logically it says no, it's not, it can't be cured. But the fact that it's 5.7 with insulin was a good sign. And which today I know is a honeymoon phase. And the doctor at that time, Dr. Aspirani, a brilliant, brilliant man who took a lot of care of me, bless him. He took a lot of care of us for years. So he said it could be some of the beta cells were not completely destroyed
Destroyed.
properly at that time,
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
which is why it was the case. And mom said for the first 3 years, your A1C was 5.5, 6, 7. So I'm like, thank God for
Yes.
small mercies. So it was at that time that it went there, and I was doing tests. And so it was just that good phase of that and adjusting to school life, and you never get used to insulin, to the injections, because it's physically painful, but
Yeah.
just adapting to the new life and yeah, working through that.
Did you have to take insulin in school amongst your friends?
No, so at that time again was timing driven. It was a syringe one with a red cap and a big needle, and it was a human actropid that I would take, and so we used to call it short acting insulin, long acting insulin, because it
Yes.
was explained in very layman term instead of medical terminology. Take this, take that. It was twice a day, morning and evening. So I never had to take injections in school, which for some reason I'm grateful for. As a child, I didn't have to think of calculations and injections, blood tests. I think in a way it just works out for people when it does. So my mom would come with injections at the start, and then I started taking injections myself over time. But it was 2 injections, morning and evening.
So you would take short and long both in the morning and short and long both in the evening?
That's what I recollect.
That's what you recollect.
Yes, because it was long and short acting insulin, that we should just
Mm-hmm.
call it those terms.
Hmm.
And that time there was something called human insulin and insulin that you get from pigs, in 1996. So I would take the human one, it was always written H, human
Yes.
actropid.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that I would take. Yeah,
Yeah.
so two injections was for a long time till college, in fact.
Till college. Okay. And you mentioned feeling different in school and having restrictions, having a very disciplined upbringing that started to get into your childhood, the innocent years of 9, 10, 11, 12. As you started entering into adolescence and early teens, something started to change. What was that?
So it was, so like I said, when you're innocent and you don't think much, just live your life, live in the moment. It really, and again, this I realized this much, much later, like recently. It didn't really impact me. But then I slowly started observing that my sibling is perfectly fine. We have the same genes. He eats everything. He roams around. He sleeps late hours. He roams everywhere. He eats what he wants. And there was, of course, there was still food in the house that had sugar, because at
Mm.
that time, mostly people say don't have sugar. No one spoke about carbohydrates. So there were things that were there. So I would sneak up slowly because I saw him eat. So I was like, why is he eating? I should eat. So that I would sneak up and start doing that. And if mom and dad saw it, then they would, of course, get upset. And they are trying to, of course, try to keep me healthy. But when they are at that point telling us if we can definitely do something to reduce her blood sugar, they would come and tell me in the middle, or they would catch me in the act and like, why are you eating this? Or probably because you're a child, the tone matters, right? If you're telling a strict tone, then I get upset, but I still want to eat it. It hasn't quenched. You haven't really
Satisfied.
found out. Yeah, and the root cause hasn't been addressed. Why am I doing it? Because I've seen someone else do it, and I've seen them in schools, right? Because in school everybody ate food, and there was this canteen in school which was definitely not healthy food, but there was samosas. There were these things called Pepsis, which was really unhygienic that I think about now, but everyone's having it, but I was not allowed to have it. So I would be, then I wanted those 1 rupee coins, 2 rupee coins. I would sneak up and try and take 1 rupee coin from my dad, looking when he went, and I knew when he'd go for bath, and I'd go there, sneak up 1 rupee coin just to have this unhealthy, disgusting thing, but just to fit in, because I wanted to be part of them, because they all ate it. I wouldn't. And in India, of course, we had carb heavy meals. So it would always be the rice and chapati. As South Indians, we had more rice than chapatis, but chapati was easier to take in dabbas. So that was there, and it was chapati and bhindi. Like, how tasty is that? And I could see your schoolmates eating everything else. School functions, Diwali party, Christmas party, there was chips. I'm not allowed to have them. Birthday parties, loads of them, chocolates everywhere. I used to wait, and I remember telling you this, I used to wait to get a hypo just to have even a biscuit or even chocolates. So it was, at some point I was excited about hypos. It's so disturbing to even say it, but I would be so excited to get a hypo so that I could have one chocolate without getting shouted at, or without anyone judging you, or without anyone without you feeling like you've done a grave mistake. It came to that point, and it's because I have seen others, or because I have started, and thank God there was no internet at that point. I would have seen a lot worse.
Yeah, this was just in your immediate circle you wanted to fit in, but
yeah,
imagine how it is for kids now. Yeah.
and I was becoming thin because I had lost weight. So then, and I was becoming thinner at that point, because I had reached that phase in school where I had stopped doing blood tests.
Oh.
I had reached that rebellious phase where there were years where my mother would literally request me to do blood test, and I would tell her, "Mom, you have fingers, do your own blood test. Why are you behind me?" And she was just telling me that, and I was like, "Oh gosh." She's like, "Yeah," and she's like, "It's not you. All children would have done that." She's telling me, "Don't blame yourself," but I was like, "Did I say that?" She's like, "Yeah, you would refuse to do blood test." By then, the HbA1c had reached 8, because I was on 2 insulins. There was a standardized dose. Nobody explained this is for so much insulin, or this is what you should do. And if you exercise, no one has told you what you do about it, about blood test, or the fact that you eat something, or you just have something around you. So there was nothing on that concept. So if it's hypo, you eat sugar, or you eat something sweet. And again, there was no one explained the 15-15 rule. So I used to like Parle-G biscuit. So I would finish an entire Parle-G biscuit with chai, because I've seen others do it. It's Parle-G biscuit, and I ate the entire pack. It stresses me thinking how much my sugar would have shot up after that, and I would have breakfast after that, because a feeling of hypoglycemia lasts longer than the actual impact on the blood sugar.
So you're still hungry.
Yeah, my body is still saying, because it's still shaky, it's still feeling it. So I'm feeling low, and my mother is scared of hypoglycemia.
Yes.
Because people scare you of hypo, right? So she's like, no, you eat this, you eat more, you'll be fine. Never thought of doing a blood test after that. Just the pre one when you feel hypo. Sometimes I didn't even do a blood test. I would just eat it.
Just
like,
correct the hypo till the symptoms go.
Yeah. And just enjoy. I've never done a blood test. I don't think I've done 2 blood tests in a day. I didn't do blood tests for weeks. And we used to, and also it was an expensive medical condition. So I remember even those times, it was not a number, it was a range that would come in. There was a color code that would come in the blood test. You have to compare it 80 to 120, 140 to 160. There was a range that would come. There also so ketones. urine test and blood test. I would just prefer the urine test, obviously.
Obviously.
I would just go there. Oh, it's high, it's fine. Or blood test once in a while. So it was something where you have to compare it. It was a long time before the later glucometers with the exact number would come in. So at that point was assuming what 80 to 120 looks like, and 40 to 60 was a range where is hypo in my head. Some very faint color would come, very light turquoise, extremely light, some very, very light shade. That means it's low. Ketones would be extremely pale pink kind of strip, and then you accordingly act on it. Never carried blood test strips to school. I'm sure I carried glucose. I'm sure my mother would have has filled that and told the teachers,
To give it.
students, yeah, in case. So people around knew it. And it's okay, the teachers know. It's when the students know and they have questions, like it's curiosity as children. And you don't have all the answers now as a child to address them. Like, how do you feel having diabetes? I'm like, how do you answer that? Or do you feel different? Does it hurt when you poke? And people ask that till date. I'm like, it does.
It
Every poke does. You can never get accustomed to.
Yeah.
You just get numb. You just go with it. Like, just live and you move on. But you can never get over it. So
Yeah.
it was one of those phases that in school that we went through.
Wow, so many things going on there. And as you got older, you had trips. You've mentioned that you had to give up sports. You went to 4 injections. You had to give up on trips with friends, outings. What was going on?
So and again, this took me a lot of time to understand why or how this actually panned out. But there were school trips, which I didn't go for many of the school trips after being diagnosed. And I would agree, as a parent, I would be worried to send my child anywhere. And then there were then I started going for some trips after a few years, I think after 2-3 years. By then they started overnight trips where you go to Mathiran and all of that. And my closest friends at the time would go as well, but I was never allowed. So it would create that irritation and anger that why not? I get it today why they didn't send it. I mean, there was no blood test, there was no sensor, there's no pump to stop it. But I never went for any of those. I was, in fact, more an athletic person. So I liked sports. I loved badminton. And I was blessed to stay in Mumbai Fortress where we had a court. So I'd play there and I would win tournaments. And I wanted to participate from an inter-school tournament perspective. And I remember going there after a lot of arguments, forcing my father that I want to go. And I was very rebellious by then. I think I was far better in school than college, but I still wanted to go and try something out there to learn that. And I went there and I was waiting for it to start. And there are many students there. They didn't care about time. I had timings. I had to eat at a particular hour. I can't just run at 1 o'clock. And we waited for 3 hours, 4 hours. My turn didn't come. Then dad's like, it's food time. You need to eat. You need to do this. And then he's like, this is how it's going to be. How are you going to manage all of this? So it was, again, not that I had so many dreams. I just wanted to participate in sports because I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed playing games. I just cut that off. I didn't participate in intra-school or intra-college, though there were opportunities. And at that time, women athletes, it was a big deal. Like, go for it. Why don't you try it? And I wanted to. I just didn't have the right tools. But maybe he was like, play caroms. I mean, for me, that was not sport. It was sitting. I personally didn't enjoy it. I mean, I'm sure many do. For me, it was running and playing something. Yeah, but I love outdoor games, which today I walk, so I still enjoy that. And I'm not addicted to the phone, thankfully. But the basketballs or the cricket, oh yeah, trying to fit in. I was a tomboy, so I reached that phase where I played with my brother. So he was so happy to have kind of like a brother, and we used to play football, cricket at home. I would play cricket. None of the girls would play. I would go and play in all the cricket games wherever I went and participate, because it was not a tournament. There was no guidelines and timings. I could at least tell them, can we play at this hour? It's my brother. Least he could do was listen to timings. So I started playing in those and trying to fit in somewhere. like be part of some other, because I was not a person playing with dolls. I couldn't fit into that. I'm clearly not someone who wears makeup, or I don't look into fashion any, so that those things never really interested me. But I want to do something here, and this is
Yeah.
where I was able to play some sport, enjoy being part of some of these. So contributing in all of the cycling, skating, so a lot of those exciting sports that people would like to do. So I
Yeah.
would do some of those, or just skipping or running around. It also helped me with the exercise thing that people had told me in the hospital. You have to exercise. So it helped me. So
Mm.
that was a part where I tried to fit in. The downside to this was, because there was no proper education on the carb intake, or what I should be eating, or blood tests that I should do, or activity overall, or how to manage it from a lifestyle perspective. I remember sometimes I would do this just to reduce the blood sugar. I've skipped up to 500 to 800 at a stretch, just going on skipping. The skin of my leg started peeling off. Sugar was still high. So that was, so when I used to do these and do a blood test, come on, it has to be low. It has to be low. It would still go high, and it was beyond me why it's not coming down. So when I've tried solutions of my own, and the result isn't showing that, then it would impact me. Like, I'm like, what more do you want of me? There's so much to do, and there's so much that I can do, but I'm unable to do it. So it was, I mean, I didn't know about, maybe it was the quality of insulin, maybe at that time, because maybe it was impacted, or how we stored it, or there's so many factors,
So many factors.
hormonal changes. We never know. So but I didn't know that. So
My
yeah,
God.
so it was one of those things that made me feel left out,
Left
more
out.
from a health perspective than anything else. And it's funny that that still continues till date. It's really sad, but till date, I still, as an adult, try to fit in. I still try to fit in. I'm trying so hard not to, but I still try to fit in and have that extra thing because they're having it, or with office, try to fit in. But yeah, we get to that later. But the fitting in thing is still there.
Well, you're not alone in that. I think that's probably universal, is as humans, we are tribal in nature. We are pack animals, we are herd animals. And to survive, we need to stay with the herd. That's a survival instinct. So wanting to fit in actually has survival reasoning behind it, is you need to stay with your tribe to survive.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting, because that's one positive part I do have of JDF, Juvenile Diabetes Federation. That was one place that was happy. Wadi Hospital had recommended me there. And when I went, then I saw people, children who had the same conditions as I did. I didn't feel like an alien at that point. It's not that I went and bonded with everyone, because it was all new. But it was one of those initial phases where I used to interact, be part of some of those, the various initiatives that they took. It's interesting, because mom told me they even had a conversation from a psychology perspective about how do you manage that to stay positive. They had those sessions, dietitians. They used to have seminars on diabetes education. And then at 11 a.m., because it was what they've told, all kids have biscuits. So everyone gets Mari biscuits, 2 of them. And then my mother said that I would look at all the children eating, smile, then I would eat. For her, such small things matter, because I was fitting in, because at home, the other sibling didn't have it. So I'd look there, oh, they're all doing it. Okay. So it was nice. So I think we went there for 2-3 years. Challenge was the school timings, and it was in Oshiwara, and we stayed in Dockyard Road. So Sundays there was a mega block, we couldn't go. Slowly that reduced because of the situation. I made one friend, I remember, because I remember that I promised myself I'll make her my friend for life. Somebody who has this, somebody who understands it. And then I tried calling her once, we spoke, then I kept calling her twice, right? She stopped responding. That time it was costly to just pick up the phone, and it was a mobile days, it was landline.
Yes.
But I lost hope in her as well, because I was like, that was one person who I could bond with, but it didn't really get there. And then, yeah, that's when I slowly started writing a diary, which I wrote for about 20 years.
20 years of a diary, because there was some loneliness after a point.
A lot of it. So my diary had everything, all because you need to vent out somewhere. And unfortunately, what I did a lot was venting out and impacting my own health. I didn't realize it, but I was venting out. I used to have days when I would just shut the door and just cry. I would just cry. But I didn't want people seeing it because I want my mom and my brother, especially my brother, because he's my sibling. He has to see me as a strong person. So in my teeny tiny head, I had to be strong. So, and I knew there's a financial issue at home because of the cost. I knew my mother is stressing out. And I could see my mother doesn't inject my brother. She would inject me. So does she not like me? In my head, that's how I was perceiving it. Because she would come to me for injections, medical talk, have this food, don't have, because her head is always stressed. With my brother, she would talk about other things, obviously. So to me, she's like, I thought my mother didn't even like me. Father was someone who was who would get upset really quickly. So he would get angry. My head, I'm like, oh God. So to me, I felt alienated in my own house. My brother didn't know how to communicate. He was a child. He didn't know the gravity of the situation to communicate with me. And the rest were all kids in my school. So who knew? Who do you talk to? It was my diary. My diary had all the negative emotions and anger and letters that I've written that I want to kill myself. I've actually written a lot of it, signed it. Yeah, so I had a lot of those sessions and cry, but no one would ever see me cry. No one knew I was crying. It was just there, like a lot of that.
Wow.
And the worst thing, like one thing you mentioned, society, is it's something that I would request anyone watching this video is don't ever tell a child what, for example, that it's your fault that caused a condition. I had people tell me that you didn't pray enough, you're not religious, you're not a holy person, God did this to you, or you were not a nice child, or you were not a good person, that's why you did this. And I had people, so many, tell me that. I stopped believing in a God. I stopped believing in people, and that's when it became a lot more negative, aggressive. I was rebellious through with all my relatives, everybody out there, because everybody has an opinion on what you should eat, what you should do. People who don't even know what diabetes is, everyone is telling a child, don't eat that. Birthday party, don't, and they tell you in front of everyone. It's also insulting. I mean, a person's anyway going through it.
Yeah.
There is mental struggle, which I didn't know at the time. I was struggling mentally. But you're also telling the person in school, college, birthday parties, functions, weddings, family get-togethers, you're just alienating the person further and further and further away. So it was, yeah, it was a point that was it just got a bit too much at that stage.
It did. And you reached a point of, feeling outcast, and you're doing what everybody tells you. You're taking insulin because you know you needed to survive. There's a part of you that's thinking about maybe it's better to die and end this thing, and that sort of dark space that you get in your head. And, I think before we conclude this part of the video, I want to bring it to a close with where you had reached by about 2013. So we're talking 1996 to 2013, this journey finally brought you to a stage where you were taking 4 injections a day. You were angry and lonely in your head, both. Like, someone needs to understand me and nobody understands me. That lonely feeling, only my diary understands me. Taking 60 units of insulin a day through 4 injections. Pain at your injection sites where your skin is now getting inflamed wherever you're taking the shots. Sugar levels, in spite of doing what you've been told, eating 6 meals a day, poking yourself 4 times a day, and still dealing with glucose levels going anywhere from 40 to 400 in one day, in 24 hours, going all the way extremes.
Yeah.
With an HbA1c of 8%.
8, yeah, it was closer to 2013. There was a time that it was 10. I think that was the highest that it's been. And I think those were the darkest days. I think school was still, honestly, more innocence because children aren't there yet. College is a whole different ball game because you're now a teenager, you're in college. It's funny, but from uniforms you wear whatever you have to wear. And then there is college has a canteen with lunch, and I used to have maza. I didn't even like maza. I hated that thing. It's so sweet. I would have it just to fit in again. And then they had parties. People had alcohol. I've never touched alcohol because I was told you get hypoglycemia. I didn't touch alcohol. Never smoked a cigarette in my life. But people started doing a lot of those, and now it was not just about food. There was about parties, there was alcohol, there was drugs, there was smoking, there was a million things. I had glasses on, so there were jokes about that. I was skinny. I didn't of course look like a model. So there were so many new things that went in, and there were of course people stepping out all the time, carrying stuff, roaming around. I couldn't do any of that. There was sports, which I anyway told you I exempted myself out of it because of what happened. And there's the only thing, it was education. I mean, I could study, but how much do you study when you're mentally broken down? There was also the pressure. Yeah, there is that, and there's a pressure. I was supposed to be a doctor. My mother was a doctor, so my aunt is a doctor. I have people who are doctors, and I wanted to honestly be a doctor, thinking I would find a cure for diabetes. But then I couldn't really poke anyone else except me, so which is why I went to BSc and microbiology, because they had something on insulin and diabetes, and I said I would study that. But education was the one thing that I could do. But beyond that, it was just terrible, because my brother went for weeks and 2 weeks on vacations and trips with friends and parties and everything. And as a girl, I was not allowed many things. As a diabetic person with diabetes, not diabetic, person with diabetes, I had a lot more restrictions on what I should and shouldn't do. So it reached a point, and my parents were very restrictive, in from watching television. Sure. Don't watch TV, don't do this, don't do that. So in the end, there's so much of that. I became that unbelievably negative person. I would snap at people. Whoever tried to have a conversation with me, I would just snap at them. I was not even and at this time is when I even met my now husband. He was in college. And if anybody who meets him knows he's an amazing human being, I didn't see it, because I had built this ego and this pain body and this entire thing around me, that I wanted that attention that I didn't receive all these years. I wanted someone to make me feel special. I wanted to be part of all the madness. I also wanted someone with, because of how I lived, money had become a thing for me. I would save money. I would save a lot. And that I would save by walking from school to home, and many places, 5 rupees, 10 rupees. I saved 10,000 rupees by saving, so that I have a medical fund if I run away from home. I'd kept a fund for insulin so that I would survive that. So for me, I needed somebody who had money, did I say money? Monetary benefits, money, so that I said, if I need a rich person. And I needed someone who looked like a Prince Charming. And I had a lot of these things in my head, because I had watched movies. I ended up doing that because I would not go anywhere. I'd watch movies which had fantasized what life would be or what you should do. And that's what I reached out to. So emotionally, I was writing those diaries, which is negative, with letters and hatred and anger. And anyone who sees it, there was not a single positive line there. Anyone who says negative things about me, I would write it there. I would cry, I would weep. I was good at writing and writing poems, so I would write those as well. Mostly was letters to God. Why don't you kill me? Why don't you kill me? And in college is when I met this professor, who was the first adult I spoke to. He passed away last year, bless him. But he took special care with me, and he would just sit there. And that's when I took 3 injections. So that's when I had to fit in again. Injections in college. In between lunch hours, rush, take an injection, find a toilet. If you're traveling anywhere, especially the Indian Railways, I would sit in the toilet, which is disgusting, and then take the Lantis and flights, all of that. But that professor, who was much older, my father's age, he sat and explained what love is and how your parents actually caring for you. Ignore your friends, because my one friend hid my insulin with chemicals as a joke. And I lost my temper. A birthday gift was a big tub of ice cream. So they didn't realize the gravity of it. But for me, I had an instant reaction. My ego was impacted. Like, how dare you?
It's personal, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, how for me, everything came personal. Everything about diabetes was so personal. I couldn't speak. I would just burst into tears. So that professor actually, and I was in touch with him, and the only person till date whose feet I would touch, but he actually helped me throughout, like
Wow.
drilling it. Like he stopped that negativity getting further. Like I said, the universe sends you people. I had good teacher in school. In college, I had this professor, and throughout he was in touch. He would call me and check on me till he passed away. Still check on how am I doing. I would meet his wife, his family, go home, and all the professors, they started taking care of me because I had burnt myself in the chemistry lab. Someone had burnt my face, and he took care. That's when he said, "You have diabetes. Do this, do that," and then he would check on me, motivate me, positive thinking, and that was huge. And that helped me give a presentation on diabetes
Oh,
when I was in my post graduation. The first time I spoke, voice broke. I couldn't speak, but I think that was where I started, in a way, heading towards positivity
wow.
at that time. But yeah, but I had such a huge ego. I was so negative. I was such a rebellious, so ill-tempered. I mean, I even fought with my then husband, said, "Don't ever talk to me. I don't want to speak to you ever again." Because to me, and he was such a nice person, but to me it was like he was quiet, and I wanted someone who gives me attention, who talks, who, who tells me, "Oh, you poor thing, you're suffering. How can I help you?" Because I didn't get that. Maybe
Mm,
that's what I created in my mind, that I wanted that.
mm.
So it was in it's the cobwebs that the mind created, but it created really thick cobwebs, really thick cobwebs. So that's
Wow.
when the A1C were 10, and the injection shots just increased from 3 to 4, still doesn't come down. And one other thing to say also was I was taking insulin post meals, which was frightening, but I was told to do that. And I was taking insulin post meals, and all the doctors, because my mother, being a doctor, kept calling hospitals to find out good doctors. How do I treat my daughter? Because the A1C is going higher.
Hmm.
And I had stopped doing blood tests. I didn't do A1C for 1 year. I should go for eye checkup because they would drag me. And then they would scare you. Everyone you go and meet will say, "Take care, or your eyes get damaged, or your kidney gets impacted." And you would see that every time I'd come to you, I'm like, "I'm scared of my eye checkup. I'm scared of my eye checkup." Because it's been put into your
Been
head as
drilled.
a fear. Yeah, and that's what something my father had done as well, to tell me to take care of myself. Like, this will happen, your kidneys get damaged. So it's I've become a person who lived on fear. It was just induced, everything was induced by fear. And whichever doctors I met at the time would just have a 5-10 minutes conversation, check the past two recent blood tests, HbA1c, and then you would just go. No one has sat and no one has ever spoken about carb count. No one has ever sat and even understood if this person is fine, because you can see a person is, you can sense it when the person's unhappy. I mean, I'm grumbling, I'm upset, you can see it. But yeah, it didn't happen there. So that's when my mother continued finding, and thank God for the IMA. I think that was I mean, that was a big miracle. And I mean, and kudos to my mother, she didn't give up. She just kept finding doctors. Like, people should give no one talks about the caregivers,
Yeah.
but my God, my mother.
Yeah. My gosh, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to what happened when your mom kept trying, looking for answers for you. We're going to do that in the follow-up video to this. And below this video, I'm going to put a couple of resources because, Liva, you've touched on some important points that I want whoever watches this video can look in the description of this video below and read about diabetes distress scores. So there is a diabetes distress score for the person living with diabetes, for the caregiver of someone with type 1 diabetes. And it's different. When you're the parent who's going through it, you go through different distress. And when you're living through it as a child or a young person with type 1, you're going through your own level of distress. So there are validated scores. So you can check how much is diabetes affecting you mentally. You may not be depressed, but living with diabetes might be a massive burden for you. And there is help. There are resources for that. Liva also mentioned the 15-15-15 rule. I'll put that also in the description, what that means to treat hypoglycemia. Obviously, you need to do this with your doctor on board. This is not a medical consultation for anybody who's watching. And the other thing Liva mentioned was carb counting. She mentioned long-acting insulin, slow-acting insulin. I'm going to put links for more educational resources for that in the description of this. And then please continue to watch. Liva and I are going to be back with the follow-up now